Hello, good afternoon. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Thursday, August 14th, 2025. The time is 2:10 p.m. and I am in Miami, Florida. This lecture is called Meritocracy. Meritocracy is a term used to describe a social system where a person's attributes, talents, work ethic, and the application thereof determine their success. I submit to you that gang-stalking, which is a federally enabled disruption mechanism in which throngs of United States citizens are mobilized to a targeted person's exact location repeatedly throughout the day, every day, regardless of where the targeted person is a nullification of America's ability to call itself a meritocracy. As a matter of fact, political theorists and political scientists have not come up with a word to describe America's present capacity to uphold its own constitution. There's no word for it. Okay, a democracy is a country or system of government where the people get to elect representatives from their own populace to represent their interests at the federal, state, and local levels. An oligarchy is a system of government where the wealthiest in a society get to make the political decisions. A meritocracy is what I just explained, which is basically a social system where a person's own abilities decide their future. There are a number of types of social systems, or what you might call governmental mechanisms, that have been identified over the centuries. The United States of America doesn't fit any of them. It's not a plutocracy, it's not an oligarchy, it's not a meritocracy, it's not a democracy, it's not a constitutional republic. I don't know what the hell this country is. But I can tell you this. It's nothing like the United States Constitution describes it. Okay? Life, liberty, and happiness are only afforded a few. Inalienable rights, a few. The ability to openly pursue one's interest, a few. The ability to walk around unobstructed, a few. The ability to pursue one's interest, a few. The ability to pursue one's goals, a few. The ability to become a person who will attempt to create or establish themselves in this country in various capacities and help others do the same, a few. Only a few out of the many are afforded these constitutional liberties, rights, and freedoms. I can tell you one thing. The few that do get to enjoy these constitutional offerings, the few that do get to enjoy these, I can promise you they're not targeted individuals or targeted in any way. The United States federal government uses taxpayer money, and this is conclusive information that you're getting. It's firsthand information you're getting, and it's documented information you're getting. Now, if you're a targeted person in this country, your rights have been extrajudicially stripped from you from the top down. Okay? And that includes the ability to work and pay taxes. If you are a targeted person, you are either not working and paying taxes, you are an entrepreneur like I am, or you're just simply destitute. Those are your only three options. Because with the workplace mobbing mechanism, your co-workers become gang stalkers while you're in the workplace. If you try to go to higher education, your peers become gang stalkers as you're trying to earn your education. Okay? You cannot take advantage of any of the stated liberties that the U.S. Constitution or the Bill of Rights offers if you are a targeted person. Those rights have been extrajudicially stripped from you, and quite frankly, the Supreme Court of the United States, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for not investigating this or even saying anything about it. You're waiting on a signal from Congress before you speak on it. And you know what that says to me? Incompetent federal leadership. And at the federal level, lawmakers, Supreme Court justices, all parties involved, in conjunction with the national security mechanism, because that's gang-stalking's excuse to exist, national security. Okay, it's a national security auxiliary. You all need to re-examine why you got into politics. You need to re-examine why you got into national law enforcement, talking to the DOJ. And to people who work in the DOD, your undercovers act like animals. And I got a lot of them around me right now. You've waged a war, the collective of you, all of the above. You've waged a war on unsuspecting United States citizens without declaring it. If you all had any of the spine or the decency, we'll call it class, if you had the class to issue a declaration of war against the citizens that you have waged war on with the gang-stalking mechanism, you know what would happen? You ever heard of Benito Mussolini? The Prime Minister of corporate state Italy during World War II? That's what you'd have on your hands. And I'm talking to all the federal auxiliaries of the United States right now who know gang stalking exists but refuse to address it out of fear of embarrassment. You've declared war on your own citizens. You remember Benito Mussolini? If you had the class to actually declare war on the citizens of this country that you saw as either subversive to its progression, a threat to its sovereignty, or seditious in any way, you would have an uprising like the one Benito Mussolini orchestrated. Benito Mussolini stormed Rome, the capital, with thousands upon thousands of peasants armed with whatever they could get their hands on. It was essentially an untrained army he led into Rome, stormed the capital, deposed the existing prime minister, walked right up to King Victor Emmanuel III and said, "I'm installing myself as prime minister now. This is a hostile takeover." Now, the state of Italy up to that point had never seen anything like that happen, so it was unprepared. Now, having said that, in 2025, okay, this was in the 1940s. Okay, fast forward 80 years. If somebody were to try to do that in Italy, or really in any organized country, In 2025, that rebellion will be put down quickly, because no citizen population can put together an army to storm the capital of the country they live in and take power. That just simply is not possible these days. The general populace of the United States in particular, or any country, just simply wouldn't have the personnel, weapons, or stratagem to do such a thing these days. But you remember what happened with Mussolini. As a matter of fact, corporate state Italy was on the side of the Axis powers back in World War II. Mussolini was on the side of the Showa Emperor of Japan, Hirohito. He was on the side of the Reich Chancellor of Germany, Adolf Hitler. He was on the side of the enemies of the United States, you see. And quite frankly, the United States had weapons and technology, as well as alliances that were at least on par with the Axis powers, but it was ultimately Soviet Russia that stopped Hitler's army on the Eastern Front. And that's a matter of record. And the Allied powers were able to capitalize on that destruction. Now, what does this have to do with what I'm saying? What I'm saying is this. If you're going to declare war on me, and that's exactly what you've done, because your Department of Defense is using orchestrated means to attack my person and that of my significant other on a daily basis. We're not an army. You understand? This isn't Axis versus Allied. This isn't the US versus the Iraqis. This isn't the US versus Vietnam. This isn't the US versus Afghanistan. This is the United States versus a few unarmed citizens, and you're using military stratagem as part of your attack mechanism. Now, I'm going to tell you something, because I know I got some of these DOD, or I'm not sure if it's Department of Justice, but definitely Department of Defense. You're constantly instigating problems with me on a daily basis, okay? I see your people, and I let you know I see your people. And I treat your people horribly for a reason. It's because you conduct yourself like zoo animals, and you're instigators. Furthermore, I know what you're really trying to do. You're really trying to instigate a hostile situation where you'd have an excuse to use military stratagem and thus violence against my person. That's ultimately what you want to do, because you're angry at me for going on the internet and exposing this degenerate, cowardly, and thuggish program that your people participate in, called gang-stalking. You want to injure the man that put your business on the internet. But I'm going to tell you something. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. As a matter of fact, if I had to do it over again, I'd have started gang-stalking in action back in 2013. I started it in 2017, early 2017. If I had to do it over again, I'd have done it 4 years sooner. When I first started experiencing synchronization in Cleveland, Ohio in the year 2013. Advanced synchronization anyway. What you're looking to do is you're looking to instigate a hostile encounter, and you're a coward for it. Because you're dealing with a citizen who has spoken out against you administratively and communicated my problems to you. But you in turn would like to instigate physical hostility towards the man who is exercising his First Amendment rights to expose this drivel that you participate in. What is a meritocracy, ladies and gentlemen? A meritocracy is when a person can get up in their teenage years, go to their high school, do their work, participate in extracurricular activities to prepare themselves either for life or college, the workplace or the university, a job or college coursework, and then succeed at whatever they attempt to do after high school based on their personal abilities and the application of oneself. Gang-stalking has introduced something called workplace mobbing, which essentially takes certain citizens out of the workplace. So it doesn't matter how well you prepare yourself, it doesn't matter how well you apply yourself, it doesn't matter how many overtime hours you put in, it doesn't matter the rapport you build, it doesn't matter the work ethic you have, it doesn't matter the personal faculties you have. You're going to be moved out of that position. You're going to be moved out of it by a signaling mechanism carried on by your coworkers so that they can quote unquote eat your lunch. Your lunch being any success you could possibly have with that company. Your lunch being any chance at promotions. Your lunch being a retirement from that company. All because they want all that for themselves at your expense. It's federally enabled. The federal government of the United States gets to decide who succeeds and who doesn't. And ultimately, it activates its military and law enforcement resources to this end. How do you as a government ensure that the population of your country that you want to succeed actually succeeds and everyone else is marginalized? Well, it takes a lot of planning. And a lot of planning has happened. Gang-stalking has been going on in various capacities since the 1960s, ladies and gentlemen. Who gets to succeed and who doesn't? Well, if I can get my departments of defense and justice on board, find enough useful idiots to use signals and disruption mechanisms, and find ways to demoralize targeted people regularly and endlessly and invisibly at whatever they try to do, even go to the grocery store. I mean, some targeted people have trouble getting groceries, much less holding or keeping gainful employment. Why? Because they're constantly disrupted. They're constantly synchronized. They constantly have disease spreaders mobilized to their exact location. They're constantly annoyed. All of this in a synchronized fashion, using a system of signals, verbal commands, cues, vehicular maneuvers, and other gestures communicated one to another by their gang stalkers to their exact location so that they know who to disrupt and when. Who gets to succeed? Me personally, I do. Your host, E.I. Smith. I get to succeed. You know why? Because I already have. I've put together a tremendous project in which I lay out for you a vast sprawling, hidden, covert, shadow disruption mechanism financed by you, the listener. And yes, people are chosen for success or not based on a number of factors that have not been made public by the federal establishment of this country. I have laid out what my interpretation of these factors are in previous videos. I encourage you to watch me on a number of my websites so that you can see for yourself what I believe the factors are. Who gets to succeed and who does not? That is not a question that a government has any business asking anyone. The only thing a government has to do is collect taxes, provide a military, provide infrastructure, provide elected officials, provide law enforcement, and provide general oversight as to how it believes or how it interprets its society should run. I or anyone else don't need a government, especially one that claims to be a constitutional republic, telling me that I can or cannot succeed. I don't need a government telling the person next to me, you can take what he has because you deserve it more than he does. You know what I call that? Governmental thuggery, legislative thuggery, political thuggery, taxpayer misappropriation, crimes against humanity. Ultimately, you call it a failed state. Is that what I'm calling the United States of America? You bet I am. Now, in past videos, I've tried to give America some credit as to some of its historical accomplishments, particularly that in technology and military warfare. But even then, we've learned from the lessons of Vietnam, haven't we? The United States federal government tried to take from the Vietnamese their sovereignty, something that, quite frankly, didn't belong to the United States federal government. And what happened when the United States federal government sent troops into Vietnam? Well, you saw military loss. How many soldiers did we lose in Vietnam? The number is astronomical. It's something like 300,000. Okay? 300,000 troops did not go back to their families because the United States federal government tried to stick its nose in business that had nothing to do with it and take something that didn't belong to it. The same is true with me, your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. And all you defense knuckleheads that are around, I see you, I smell you, you're annoying, you're harmful, you're hateful, you're sarcastic, you're a lot of the types of things that I try to stay away from, but I can't get away from you because you have advanced surveillance and tracking mechanisms and personnel mobilization mechanisms that you use against me, so I cannot escape your asses. So I'll just tell you to your face plainly, like Vietnam, the United States federal government is trying to take from me, your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, something that doesn't concern it and something that doesn't belong to it. And that's my sovereignty. My sovereignty as a man, my sovereignty as somebody who enjoys inalienable rights. That don't belong to the federal establishment of this country. I don't care who the hell you send down here to Miami to watch me, to pester me. And yes, this recording is going to go up on every single one of my websites in a big, beautiful, sprawling video, so the whole world can see it. And see it they shall. Just as the whole world can see all of my videos. And you know what else? You're cowards for letting the country that you aim or that you swore an oath to uphold the interests of look bad. I'm not going to take any kind of blame from any of you whatsoever. I have the inalienable right to do what I'm saying, and you know what else? If I didn't have the First Amendment right to free speech, I'd still be doing what I'm doing. Because whether or not you acknowledge my inalienable rights is of no concern to me. I have inalienable rights whether you acknowledge it or not. And yeah, I've taken you on administratively, I've taken you on socially, I've taken you on communicatively. And I'm going to continue to do that. And if you keep bringing these riflemen around me, and I see you, you don't think I do, but I mean, you're talking to somebody who's been doing this for 25 years with respect to experiencing this stuff, acknowledging this stuff, observing this stuff. If you keep bringing those pieces of garbage around me, many of them don't speak the same language I do. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start trying to film you. Now, you do a good job of keeping your distance. You're a good job of keeping out of sight, but I still see you. I just can't get your image from where I'm standing from you. So if you keep bringing these pieces of shit around me for speaking the truth on something that you should have never let happen in the first place. And this is any part of the federal government that's involved here. I'm going to try and get your picture and I'm going to post it online so the whole world to see. And if your allies start losing respect for you, if your enemies start losing respect for you, then good. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised the United Nations allows the United States of America to continue calling itself a constitutional republic at all, or a democracy at all. Quite frankly, you need to be honest with the American taxpayer and flip your constitution upside down, rewrite it, and let people know what you really do. Because a lot of people in this country have been injured occupationally and personally by this gang-stalking mechanism that you guys keep flinging at people. A lot of people's health have suffered from the intentional germ warfare aspect of it, where you synchronize sick people to a targeted person's exact location so they'll contract diseases from them. Your own citizens. No declaration of war. You don't give your citizens time to arm themselves. You don't give them time to prepare. You simply dispatch your army of thugs against them using these cowardly signaling mechanisms with the hope that the worst will happen to each target. You're experimenting on people that you did not create. You experiment on people that you are not a part of with respect to their generations. And you experiment on people who, quite frankly, have never threatened the sovereignty of the United States. Your reasoning for what you do is clandestine. That's why I call what you do clandestine thuggery. What is a meritocracy? A meritocracy is a country where a person can apply themselves any way they possibly can to earn a living, and the best living they can possibly live without fear of disruption from their government. Gang-stalking turns all that on its head because gang-stalking is federally enabled. Even if it was something that was implemented post 9/11 in an attempt to catch what you may describe as terrorists, and now you use that term rather loosely, don't you? So you have more freedom with who you can designate a terrorist. You designated certain American citizens as terrorists without even letting them know you've done so, because they'd pick up a phone, call a lawyer, and sue your asses as quickly as you could pick up a book. So you want to protect yourself from that. You don't want this to hit the news media. You've instructed the news media to shut up. You've instructed, I'm talking to the auxiliaries that orchestrate gang-stalking, probably the Department of Defense at the top. You've instructed Congress to shut up. You've instructed every religious cleric in the country to shut up. You've instructed anyone who could make a difference in this at the corporate level to shut their mouth. You've instructed every governor in the country to shut their mouth on it too. Every state legislature you've instructed to shut up on this. You want this to be a war between the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, and U.S. citizens. But you ran into the wrong one with me, because guess what? My work has traveled worldwide whether you like it or not. And it will continue to travel, and I hope other countries learn the lessons of gang stalking in the United States so that it never takes hold in their country. Because the orchestrators of this program have sold this country and flushed it down the toilet, along with all of its edicts, its history, its constitutions, and its Bill of Rights. It's all in the commode. Because you want to wage a private war against your citizens for whatever reason, using military resources, military stratagem, military defense functions, military industrial grade technology, while all a targeted person has is their own wits and courage, and whatever resources they have at their disposal to protect themselves, electronically or personally. And if you are a targeted person, I hope you have good health insurance, because these targeted people these gang stalkers, these DOD thugs, they will make you sick. They will dispatch diseased stalkers to your exact location to stand right in front of you and use their bodies, their contaminated flesh, as weapons. And you could be anywhere. You could be anywhere where there's a public surrounding of people. And stalkers will mobilize themselves to you on a system of signals and use their disgusting bodies as weapons against you, flinging germs and bacteria at you any way they can, with the direction of a federal liaison. Yeah. The average citizen is not capable of military stratagem, formations, and mobilization tactics that are present in gang stalking. There has to be federal actors in the mix, period. What is a meritocracy? It's a place where the federal government does not get to decide who goes into a gang stalking campaign for life and who doesn't. You put somebody in a gang stalking campaign, you're pretty much guaranteeing that that person will not be able to live or pursue a life that has productive ends. What you have is a system of government that is totally devoid of any constitutional roots, any constitutional foresight, any constitutional perspective at all. You are a democracy and a constitutional republic in name only. in name only. And you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You really should. Because you're going into politics not to solve problems, but so you can get in front of a camera and do photo opportunities. And allow these news stations and whoever else is disseminating news in this country to talk about you in front of 311 million people. I'm sure there are conscientious politicians out there, just none of them have had the purpose, the sense of purpose to bring this issue up. Can one person contend with an army of people who have federal backing in their harassment tactics against that person? I don't know. How does Vietnam and E.I. Smith compare to one another? The federal government of this country has stuck its nose and put its hands on something that don't belong to it. My sovereignty is my own. My inalienable rights are my own. The U.S. federal government has allowed its cronies, particularly in the military-industrial sector, to try and rob me of that. I'm going to speak against it mightily. And I can promise that no thug that you send my way is going to rob me of it either. And when I say thug, I'm not even just talking about hardened criminals, although there are quite a few of those that operate in gang-stalking campaigns. I'm talking about anybody. Gang stalkers come from a very diverse system of socioeconomic backgrounds. There are a lot of people that participate in this that are, I guess you'd call people of means, people of influence, etc. And ultimately, what you have is something that is antithetical to a meritocracy. You essentially have it's a neo-fascist construct where the government says, well, we're not going to put it out there publicly what we're doing, but we're going to make sure the population of this country feels it. Especially the people we've deemed subversive, people like myself. You're going to get the brunt of all this while the rest of society goes ahead and flourishes. And yes, if you get a job, we're going to take you out of that job using workplace mobbing mechanisms because we don't think you need a job because, quite frankly, we don't trust you as a citizen to make use of that job to benefit society. That's the kind of thuggery targeted individuals are faced with. If you're a targeted person, you want to pursue a college degree, we're going to take you out of that program because we don't trust you, or we have entrusted our military-industrial sector to determine whether or not you are trustworthy enough to earn a degree. We will disrupt that degree and take you out of the program so you do not disrupt that program because we don't trust you to do anything with your college degree that suits society. As a matter of fact, we want to isolate you to the point where you are in either extreme poverty or destitution, and then we'll start dispatching the worst that we have so that we can control your very movements. We want to control the number of footsteps you take in a day. We want to control the number of words you speak in a day. We want to control the number of bites of food you take in a day, because this is the new order. We get to decide who does what in the United States, down to the very numbers of breaths you take throughout the day. You are attempting to infringe upon my personal sovereignty, something that does not belong to you. You are infringing upon my inalienable rights, something that does not belong to you. You're infringing upon my civil freedom, something that does not belong to you. And because none of these things belong to you, you trying to take them from me is an act of federal sanctioned robbery. We might call it state-sanctioned robbery. You are using state-sanctioned political robbery tactics to rob me of my constitutional liberties. And you're doing the same to my significant other. Not because we pose a threat to society, not because we're subversive to society, but because you simply have found an extrajudicial reason for throwing us in this thing. It's a cowardly program. It's a degenerate program. Gang-stalking I'm talking about. It's a deleterious program. What do the lessons of Vietnam tell us, ladies and gentlemen? If you stick your nose into something or try to claim something for yourself that does not belong to you, it doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter how mighty you are. It doesn't matter how numerous you are. You're in for an ass whooping. And the ass whooping that the federal government got from me was not military. I didn't pick up arms and storm the Capitol like Benito Mussolini did. I simply got on a computer, formed companies, started websites, started documenting, and started communicating. There's no doubt Congress doesn't like how I communicated to them, but so what? I don't like how you've implemented gang stalking, so I guess we're at a stalemate there. And because we're at a stalemate, we can do one of two things. We can remain enemies, because that's what we are. You made an enemy out of me, having declared war against me, a domestic war, using stalkers as your army. Or we can look each other in the face and say, an injustice has been done. Let us reason together and make sure that this thing works out amicably in favor of constitutional precepts. If you have no intention of doing that with me, well, I'm going to continue recording. I'm going to continue posting. I'm going to continue letting the people of this country and the world know that its government has made a monumental blunder of the worst kind and refuses to own up to it. Anybody can make a mistake. Anybody. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. It doesn't matter how popular you are. It doesn't matter how good your genetics are. It doesn't matter how fortuitous you are. It doesn't matter how much love or hate you have in your heart. Anybody can make a mistake. Anybody. Entire governments can make mistakes. Bodies of lawmakers can make mistakes. Anybody can make a mistake. Owning up to the mistake, learning from the mistake, and helping others avoid the mistake is the discipline to overcoming a mistake. If you choose not to overcome the mistake, but rather either hide the mistake or stand by the mistake, even though you see it's a mistake, that's what you call a cataclysmic catastrophe. And especially if it's on a governmental scale. Those kinds of catastrophes can have worldwide consequences because we live in a global economy. We were supposed to be a free market capitalist system, but how can you say that the markets are free when you determine who gets to participate in the markets? You're trying to artificially manufacture history. You're trying to artificially manufacture success. You're trying to artificially manufacture people's life stories. Now, me and my significant other, Lori, we see this every day. She doesn't see as much of it as I do because I've trained my eye to see these things. I've trained my ear to see these things. I've trained my senses to see these things. And I feed her information as you would feed somebody who is a novice in these matters. But mind you, ladies and gentlemen, in this program, men, women, and children can be targeted persons. Is that something that serves the common good? Is gang stalking something that serves the common good? Okay, I got people standing out here listening to me, recording me as I speak. They are obviously liaisons. Is gang stalking something that serves the common good? Or is it something that does not serve the common good? If it serves the common good, let the American people know how and why. If it does not serve the common good, then by proxy it does not serve society and thus has no place in society. How was America formed? The Pilgrims came over here from England because they wanted something other than the system of government that was present in England at the time. It happens. Throughout history, sometimes groups of people have left their home countries in search of something different. It's a romantic story, isn't it? Then they met with the Indians that were here already and they decided they wanted to live side by side. They taught the Indians their way of life. The Indians taught them their way of life. At some point, the Indians said, you know what? These settlers, they're growing in number. They're eventually going to take our land for us. And the Indians turned on them and started doing horrible massacres to them. Then the settlers turned around, picked up arms, and over the next 300 years, whooped the Indians into oblivion. And you know what? That's simply the nature of war. To the victor goes the spoils. This vast land that we call the United States was the trophy of that 300-year war between the settlers and Indians. The settlers won that war. And I've done extensive research on it. They won it fair and square. And it was a treacherous war. It was a bloody war. It was a hostile war. It was one of the most intense combat scenarios in the history of mankind that we know of. And it was fought over this beautiful rolling land that we call America. Did the settlers go through that 300-year war so that future future generations would have to combat gang-stalking campaigns? That's an insult to the settlers' legacy. It's an insult to the legacy of all the soldiers who fought in the Civil War. Whether you believe that the Northern Army had the better political philosophy or the Southern Army had the better political philosophy, ultimately the Northern Army whooped them because President Abraham Lincoln, he essentially crippled the South economically by freeing the slaves. Now the North has the advantage because the South is running out of money because they don't have slaves to stimulate the tobacco and cotton economy anymore. The tobacco and cotton that the South was using that the South was sending to Germany in exchange for Deutschmarks, those Deutschmarks were funding the Confederate Army. Once the slaves were freed, no more tobacco, no more cotton, no more Deutschmarks. The Confederacy starved out. It was a brilliant military maneuver by Abraham Lincoln, period. And the northern states won, and now we have the United States of America rather than the northern states and the southern states. It's simply history. Get over it. It happens. History happens. But if you try to manipulate history in favor of one side over the other, what's that going to do? What's that going to do but make this country that is attempting to do the manipulation look terrible? Up until I realized I was a targeted person in 2016, I couldn't find a flaw with America. I didn't too much care for how the Iraq War was prosecuted, but you know what? No country is perfect, no government is perfect. I found that to be a rather imperfect decision, but you know what? It happened. Some bad things came out of that situation, and some good things came out of that situation as well. The global conversation on war and peace was stimulated because of that war. Americans learned more about Middle Eastern affairs than ever before because of that war. Presidential powers and congressional powers and the power of the people were all put under a magnifying glass because of that war. Those are good things because it allows us to learn from the conflict, to learn from the times, and to move forward as a country better than we were before the war happened. What does gang-stalking do? I'm going to be honest with you, it's nothing like that. It's just simply a goofy, disruptive mechanism that puts these signal-taking weirdos against U.S. citizens. I mean, it's beneath the dignity of the United States federal government. It's beneath the dignity of the United States federal government. A government that I was always proud of growing up, a government that I was always proud of in my 20s, and a government that I still wanted to be proud of in my 30s. And you know what? It's going to sound funny. In a way, I'm still proud of my government because you know what? I think that my words have reached some ears. And I think that some steps are being taken to understanding this program even more. I have to say I appreciate that. But if you weigh how proud I am of my government right now against how disappointed I am in my government right now, I'd say I'm about 70% disappointed and 30% proud because of gang-stalking. If it wasn't for gang-stalking, that number would probably be more like I'd say 60%. I'd say 60% proud, 40% disappointed. Without gang stalking. So gang stalking has made me a disappointed and quite frankly an agitated, dissident citizen. And you know what? I think it's to the point now where, and I know I'm being listened to by certain government auxiliaries. I'm glad, because you're going to learn something listening to me, that I can promise you. I think it's to the point where there are certain members of the federal establishment of this